Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the workshop. It is fantastic to have you here, and it is especially fantastic to have you here for two reasons. One, we are going to be making a Damascus stiletto dagger, and two, we've got a shop full of some very talented people. We have some friends here hanging out, and we have Niels from Black Dragon Forge, as well as Josh from Josh Smith's Knives. So it's a full house, which is very exciting. We have a very exciting project, and before we jump in, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, which is Raid Shadow Legends. Raid Shadow Legends is the mobile RPG game that is taking the mobile gaming landscape by storm. In case you've been living under a rock for the past few months, it has an amazing storyline, awesome graphics, giant boss fights, and more than 400 champions for you to collect and personally customize. Said it before and I'll say it again, the graphics on this are insane. Have a look at that dragon. Fire out of the eyes. The thing is menacing. The amazing thing is that this game is going to remind you of classic RPG games. It's totally free and it is going to get you hooked for hours on end. So you can enjoy these crazy battles on iOS or on Android by hitting my link in the description. Now, hitting my link in the description below not only supports this channel, but you're going to instantly get 50,000 free silver as well as a free epic champion as part of the development team's new player program. Be sure to go download the game at the end of the video because the game is growing super fast and they are getting ready with a lot more updates, such as their Faction Wars mode, sure to be an absolute blast. Thank you, Raid Shadow Legends, for sponsoring this video. Thank you guys for supporting our sponsors. Let's jump right in to welding up a billet of Damascus steel for this stiletto. The piece is cooling down, it's time to talk about the pattern. So, what we started with a big old stack of 15N20 and 1080 steel. We then forged it down into a square. Before forging it into a round, we turned it 45 degrees, so the pattern was coming up and down this way. Forged it back into a square, re-squaring it on the diagonal, before forging it into a rectangle. Now, as you can see, that rectangle has this S-like shape to the pattern, and so what we have done, instead of making the traditional C's that we usually make at this point in a pattern, ready to be put together to form W's, we've been making some S's. And I think it's gonna look quite interesting, because once this is all stacked up, we're gonna have some very interesting patterns going on in the steel. So of course, we're making a stiletto. It's a very small dagger. Now, we've been thinking about design a little bit as we go. Neil's recently made a stiletto, so his input has been extremely helpful. And Will drew up this stiletto here. Now, an interesting thing about these is they're kind of built around the golden mean, you know, the Fibonacci sequence. And so they end up being very proportional, an actual stiletto. And you want to tell me what you've just discovered?
We have been using one side of the ruler this whole time in freedom units. But we just found out that there's another one on here that's in freedom meters as opposed to inches.
And that's crazy, right? Because to calculate the golden ratio, you're like, okay, it's 10 of these units.
Of these freedom meters.
And so it makes it super easy for then calculating out then 6.2 out wide. Who knew? That's such a handy measuring system.
I know, freedom meters. Who'd have thunk it?
Okie dokie, I am shutting the forge down, purging the lines, turning off the fans. This is the piece that I just forged out. Now you see it's still very thick on the back side there. That's because I don't really know if we want to do anything with it right now. It's nice to have a little bit of a stockpile at Damascus, and I know that we're not going to need any more than what's down here. So that's forged out, ready for us to grind and have a look at how the pattern is developing. Oh my goodness gracious me. That is the craziest thing I've ever seen. It's like it's on fire. Okie dokie, so this is fresh off the mill. We have ourselves one beautiful and clean piece of steel on that side of it. On this side of it, it actually has a little bit of a nasty spot. See that? That's not so good, but that's okay. We don't need to include that. This is so much more material than we could possibly need. And it's now time to think about how we are gonna use this and the pattern that we have in the piece. But before we do that, we're gonna jump in and see what these guys have been doing over here as they are cracking on the design, which apparently is now a secret. Thank you, Niels.
It's a pleasure, sir.
We're doodling.
It kind of changes by the minute.
How many designs do you think you've done so far?
We've probably changed every single part of this at least a dozen times.
Yes.
What is amazing to me is that the paper has not worn through from you erasing on it so much.
I think 3 generations from now, people will still be able to get this design.
So let's run you through some terminology. What is it that we have down here, Mr. Niels?
That is hopefully going to be the stand that this is going to stand in.
Oh, a stand for it? That's awesome.
Yeah.
So this isn't an arrowhead. This right here is the point of the dagger.
No return.
That is not a part of the dagger itself. The dagger is just
that right there.
that.
Now, this is going to be a tri-edged dagger.
And that means that it has 3 edges.
And strangely enough, not sharpened.
Wait, it's not sharpened? Oh, that's great. That means that clearly it wouldn't hurt at all to be stabbed with.
No.
And it's not at all dangerous.
People said that about a truck until you get stabbed with a truck. That hurts pretty bad, doesn't it?
We killed Niels. Will. So as we come up the tri-edged blade, we then come to this area here where we have the quillions. This is a guard, essentially. It stops your hand sliding forwards and getting your opponent's blood on you. That would just be icky.
Ew.
Now, what is interesting about this is this is gonna be some good fun because we have everything from little flower ends in this design to beautiful hollow grinds on the tri-edge. Just bear in mind, there will be a quillin on this side here. So much opportunity for beautifulness and awesomeness. So much opportunity for making 35-part YouTube series. So the design on this piece is just looking so awesome. Wow. But this is where it starts to become a little bit tricky, is now we're looking at the pattern and we're trying to think how we're going to put this pattern into the piece of steel for this little tri-edged stiletto. We were going to stack it side by side. But then we end up with the issue of needing to reforge this way so much, it's just doing a whole lot of crunching, putting it into a very small finished piece of steel, and that fine pattern might not end up being particularly visible. So, the plan is we put the pieces of steel on the short end of the rectangle together, stack them up like this. We got that cool pattern in here, running down it. This is going to avoid crushing it too much, because we're going to weld along these surfaces, and then draw it out, maybe with a little twist too. I think it's going to be rather cool. It's a precarious weld though, because there's very little material, and if we do a twist too, we could maybe be breaking it. Fingers crossed, it goes well, so that's the next step.
All right, I've got 2 pieces of 15 and 20 high carbon steel cut, and these are gonna go on the outside of our billet, and I'm gonna TIG weld all the way around, and I'm gonna TIG weld all of the seams. This basically just adds a little bit more support on the sides of it, and make sure that no extra air or anything like that is gonna get into it. And then we'll be good to go. We'll be ready to fire up the forge, and hopefully forge this thing together.
It is the next morning, and as you saw, we'll put these plates on our billet of steel. It's ready to weld. My first step, as I am out with a forge welding heat, is 1 or 2 blows this way. Sounds counterintuitive, but the plates will still allow it to stick, even though our welding planes are here. Then I'm gonna turn it up on end and be upset welding it. Hopefully, I'm not bending it so much that we rip it apart. I have a feeling, though, we should have enough control to get this done just about okay. So my piece is now cooling down. You remember Will had put some pieces of 15 and 20 on the sides. I need to grind through those before I can continue forging out the blade here for the stiletto. Now, this morning we spent a good bit of time thinking about design and talking and discussing. The plan with this is to be able to have a design set out as we have, so that we can have one person working on one thing while another person works on another thing. We're going to be beginning that right now as Will gets started on one of the amazing details in here. Out of bronze up here, we're going to have this beautiful little leaf feature, little leafy feature that is going to cap over the blade. It's going to look rather beautiful. It's going to involve a little bit of lathe work. We will be jumping in to using that Monarch on a project for the first time. So while I have been working on this collar piece here, out of bronze, on the lathe before Will gets to filing it, Will and a great guest in the workshop, Josh Smith, Josh Smith Knives, thank you for being here.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
You guys are going to work on some other parts of the handle.
Exactly. So the handle is going to be a combination of bronze and Damascus. The collar and guard will both be bronze. Then we'll move into a Damascus piece here. Then the center piece will be bronze, and Alec will be putting some fancy things in there. And then Damascus, and the finial will be bronze.
And so this is a chunk of Damascus that I had made up yesterday. You're going to forge that out into a 6-inch long bar of round stock to then turn on the lathe.
Exactly.
Before we jump into that though, Josh, you're a bladesmith. Do you want to tell them a little bit about what it is that you do?
I started making knives when I was 11, and I've kind of been at it since then, and I make Damascus steel. I do a lot of mosaics. I make folding knives, buoys, daggers, this kind of stuff. I've never worked with bronze, so I'm pretty excited about that.
That's great.
And I think doing the Damascus pieces in the middle with the bronze and tying it all together, matching steel with the blade, it's going to be amazing.
I'm looking forward to it.
So Josh is a master smith. He got his master smith when he was 19. So he's pretty incredible at what he does. So we're very excited to have him here.
Well, it's awesome to have you here. I'm going to keep going on the lathe.
We're going to throw this chunk of steel in the fire. It weighs like 2 pounds.
And it's gonna weigh a whole lot less when it's done.
Exactly right. All right. Okay, so we finished the forging and Josh ground on it to remove a bunch of the material so that'll cut down on a lot of the machine time, and then we'll be able to, you know, just work in those curves and stuff a lot faster. It also means that we're ready for a little bit of a test etch, so he's gonna go ahead, throw that in the acid, we're gonna see how it looks.
It's always fun to do that, kind of like get a little sneak preview of what it's gonna look like. So.
Exactly.
Okay, this has been roughed in with the lathe bit. It would be pretty difficult to get this to final shape, cutting it on the lathe by hand, freehand in the 2 wheels. So now what's gonna happen is Will and I are gonna switch places. I now have our piece of steel for the blade ground down past the 15 and 20 plates, ready for us to forge out the blade. So I'm gonna forge some of this. Will is gonna file some of this, being very, very careful to not get entangled. I've got it forged into some round stock. It's about 5/8 of an inch thick. We're aiming for 10 millimeters, which is about 3/8 of an inch thick. What we're now gonna do is clamp it in the vise and give it a very lazy twist so that we can expose that pattern the whole way around this 3-sided edge. We got it off the lathe, the material is looking great. I cut off both ends where the material is not twisted. It's now onto the point and the tang. Okay, we have the blade forged out. It is one long round taper. We've got so much material for the tang, and we're just gonna let this have a little normalizing cycle, just chill out a little bit, and then it's gonna be on to some grinding on that. been a jam-packed 2 days here at the workshop, and you know, it's been a busy time, but we've been having a ton of fun working on this stiletto. I hope that you go get yourself Raid Shadow Legends. They sponsored the episode. Your support of our sponsors helps keep the show going. It has been a pleasure, as always, bringing you along. Big thank you to Josh Smith of Josh Smith's Knives for his help. It's been fun just having some great makers here in the workshop, hanging out with Niels of Black Dragon Forge, who's here visiting. Ton of fun. Thank you guys for joining us. It's been a pleasure. I'll see you on the next episode working on this Damascus stiletto very, very soon. Bye-bye.